Ladies and gentlemen, at long last, welcome back to Double Take. No, we were not dead. We were just dormant for a short period of time, 146 days actually to be exact. John and I had a good summer. We were back at our summer camp that we've served at the past few summers. We've grown up going there. So very tough to fit in podcasts. We missed the NBA finals, missed, I think, most of the playoffs even. But alas, I'm so thrilled to be back here on the eve of the new NBA season. My name's Alex Safey. I haven't said that yet. I'm typically joined by my twin brother, John, not Jonathan, Johnny Rocket Safey, but he's currently on the study grind for midterm. So in his absence, filling in for him, I'm excited to welcome longtime supporter and friend of the pod and one of our best friends, Mr. Eli Mallouhi. How you doing, Eli?
What's going on, man? Thank you for having me again. I'm excited to be here. We do miss John. We miss the other half of Double Take, but I'm ready to be here. I'm excited, and we're going to have a blast today. We got a lot to talk about for sure.
Beautiful. Yeah, you're filling in maybe 1/3. So I'll give a quick tease of what to expect from this show. We're going to talk a little bit just quickly about free agency, kind of the best moves of the off season, some of the worst ones as well. Then we're going to pick the Eastern Conference playoff race is very tight this year. We're going to kind of go through some of those teams, who's going to make it, who's going to make the play-in, and then some predictions for that. Then we will, of course, do the same for the Western Conference. Then we'll move on to conference finals. Who do we think's making it? Top 4 teams in the NBA. Who will make the finals and who will win the finals? And then we'll wrap up with just a few like MVP, most improved picks, things like that. And if there's any bold takes we want to throw in towards the end, that'll wrap us up. But first, kind of the biggest NBA storyline going on right now, Eli, I'd say. I mean, I kind of think that the past few weeks have been quieter as far as leading up to the NBA season. Maybe it's just because I've been busy. I haven't been paying as much attention. But I feel like
training camp, some preseason, but for the most part, it's been quieter for sure.
Yeah, exactly. It's been a little quiet. But the one thing that has been kind of on everyone's minds, and not just people who pay attention to NBA or sports, just really everywhere, has been Kyrie Irving and kind of the Kyrie Irving COVID vaccine conundrum and all that craziness that's been going on. He's not vaccinated. So the state of New York says that to be in Barclays Center, for example, you'd have to be vaccinated. So he could play 41 away games with the team, or actually not 41 because they play less. So it ends up being less.
I think it's like 39 because you can't do Toronto or the San Francisco. And then I think there was one more or whatever, but yeah.
So he would not be able to play against those teams. So he'd be able to play half the season, even though he's unvaccinated. But the team decided, you know what, we don't want someone who's going to play half our games. We want, only players, and because it's going to be a huge distraction for them. It already has been. So Eli, what do you think about what's going on with Kyrie? Obviously, maybe should he get vaxxed? What's going on with him? I don't know if you watch his Instagram live. That was a little crazy too. So just kind of, what are your thoughts on the Kyrie Irving situation?
Yeah, I watched bits and pieces of the live. I didn't watch the whole thing, but I've seen little clips or whatever. So I think I got a majority of a gist of what he said. All right. So in general, I'm a Kyrie fan. I've defended him in the past, much to the chagrin of a lot of people. In general, I think he's my favorite player in the NBA to watch. I think he's an incredible player on the court. I think he does so much good off the court that doesn't get talked about nearly enough when you're talking about who Kyrie Irving is. He's an unbelievable humanitarian. He genuinely seems like a pretty decent guy, right? And I really do support him majority of the time.
All right.
That being said, I'm out on this for sure. I can't support any of this that is going on right now. Without getting too political or whatever you want to call this vaccine, it shouldn't be a political issue, but it is. Mandates are everywhere. So he's not anti-vax. He said that a million times. He's not anti-vax. He's anti-forcing people to do stuff, which, okay, buzzword number one, okay, everybody can agree with that. I don't think anybody is oh my gosh, Kyrie, or something. He's trying to pander to people, I think. He's I'm not anti-vax, I'm anti-forcing people to do things. And everybody in theory is I support that decision. But that doesn't make any sense, right? There are mandates everywhere. You have to have a driver's license to drive because you want to keep everybody safe. You have to have a law degree and pass the bar or whatever to practice law. mandates are things that are in place so that everybody can be safe and that we can make this country or really just the world, whatever, like run. Without mandates, which is the word that is keep being thrown out there, without mandates, it's just absolute chaos. Like there's a reason why we have these things. So now you have to say, okay, should the vaccine be something that's mandated? Yes. Well, like, yes, it should, because there are vaccines everywhere. Like you have to get a vaccine to go to school. Kyrie Irving went to Duke. Duke is a private university that required vaccines for chickenpox, measles, whatever. I don't know the exact protocols, but like you have to have vaccines. So if Kyrie either has a religious exemption or is vaccinated against all these other things, right? So now we're talking about the COVID vaccine, a little bit different, fine. Like it is newer, so I get that. I get it in the beginning if you're like, oh, the day it came out, if you didn't want to run to the CVS and get it, I understand. Like I was the opposite, full transparency. I got vaccinated as immediately as I could, and I am very happy to do so. But fine. If in the very beginning, it wasn't even technically FDA approved immediately, it was emergency approved or whatever. Like in the beginning, I can at least understand. It's been almost a year. 90%, over 90% of the NBA, which is awesome, is vaccinated.
It's like 95. I think it's upwards of 95, right?
Yeah. A few weeks ago, it was 90%. Since then, we know like Andrew Wiggins has recently gotten vaccinated. I think there was someone else recently that was kind of just came out as like, I just recently did, whatever. Like it looks like it's going to be upwards of 90, right? 3/4 of the country, it was 74% like a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, whatever. So let's call it 3/4. 3/4 of the nation is. Almost every important political person is vaccinated. Like numbers are down substantially, and they're not down as much as they should because people still aren't vaccinated, unfortunately. Like the medical professionals have repeatedly said, please, please, please do it, minus a couple random, like 1 or 2 people here or there that obviously oppose it. But generally speaking, like the vast majority are practically begging everybody to get it because it's literally saving our country. And probably more importantly regarding all these things is now it is FDA approved. It was recently FDA approved like a month or 2 months ago, whatever it is. So there really is no reason left to say, like, if you don't want to get vaccinated, I can't tell you otherwise. I'm not sitting here to tell you like, do it or don't do it. I can't, I'm a human being, whatever. But to be this anti against it. And my problem isn't that he isn't vaccinated. If he doesn't want to get vaccinated, man, whatever. You don't want to play basketball. You don't want to, whatever. I don't care. Right. Fine. But being the loud minority where over 90% are, Alex, can you think of one person that has talked positively about the vaccine in the NBA?
No, and that's the funny thing. I think the people who say, yeah, I'm vaccinated, like LeBron's an example. He's been like, yeah, I'm vaccinated, but I'm not going to knock people who aren't. I think Chris Paul maybe won a first take and did the same thing where he was talking, yeah, I'm vaccinated. That was a decision for me and my family, but I'm not going to knock Kyrie, So.
And a lot of people, and a few people have said that. The one that comes to my head is Dame. Dame came out in the very beginning and was like, everybody should get vaccinated, blah, 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 whatever. But like the point is, we don't hear about those people. Who have we heard about in the news? We've heard about Andrew Wiggins, we've heard of Michael Porter Jr., we've heard about Jonathan Isaac, and we've heard about now Kyrie too, right? It's the extremely loud minority that is now speaking on behalf of the other 95% that are clearly very much, and even Andrew Wiggins, he went and he did it, right? Like,
I feel like that flew under the radar as well. Like I didn't see that he had gotten vaccinated until a few days later, but I definitely had heard like his comments and the fact that he wasn't vaccinated beforehand.
Yeah. And like, it's just become like pandering. It's just become like, he keeps saying he's like the voice for the voiceless. Like, what does that even mean? Right. Like, and he's like, everybody's like, oh, I need to do my own research. Like, what are you researching? Are you going to like labs and looking at the coronavirus under a microscope? Like, what research are you talking about? Not once have we ever heard anybody say, I need to do my research and then have them say what their research is. Show it to me.
Yeah.
Like, teach me. If I'm wrong, teach me. Like, if I'm wrong, let me know so that my little cousins who aren't old enough, whatever, won't get vaccinated, whatever it is. Like, teach me rather than just say, I need to do it for my own self. Like the main thing that is like wrong, in my opinion, here is like, this isn't a personal issue anymore. It shouldn't be. Like, I understand, like people who say that it is, like, I understand the logic behind it, but this is a public health issue now, or not now. It has been for almost 2 years. Like, a year and a half now, 2 years now, whatever it's been, almost March. Like it goes beyond that. Like it is FDA approved. This isn't even like I'm pro vaccine, but beyond that is like the pandering is the stuff that I can't just get over anymore. If you want to be anti-vax and sit in the back of the room, fine, whatever. But it's dangerous. It's dangerous that he's spreading, my opinion at least, and by my opinion, I mean roughly 3/4 of the nation, plus all of the people that actually know what they're talking about. Like he's spreading misinformation, and that's dangerous, and that's where I'm out of it. Everybody go get vaccinated. Let's end this stupid thing.
And kind of one of the first things that this reminded me of, Eli, was when he had said that the earth was flat. And he said, well, there's no photos, there's no real photos of the earth. Like we haven't been to the moon in 40 or 50 years, things like that. And so, of course that circulates the internet, and that created a whole thing where everyone's like, why does Kyrie think the earth is flat? And I think that was in the beginning of the 2017 to 2018 season. A year later, this is a quote from him where he said, he apologized and he said, at the time, I didn't realize the effect. I was definitely at that time, I'm a big conspiracy theorist. You can't tell me anything. And he said, I'm sorry about all that. For all the science teachers, everyone coming up to me like, I have to reteach my whole curriculum. I'm sorry. I apologize. So I read that quote and I just found that really funny. A year prior, he had said the earth is flat. A year after, now acknowledging like at that time, I was a conspiracy theorist. But Kyrie's always been kind of that guy that like, it feels like he wants to zag just to zag. He's I think Emmanuel Acho said it where he said Kyrie is a contrarian without a cause. Like he's kind of just against things. And then even like when you look at that the long Instagram live that he had, it was just a lot of just emptiness. Like it was very confusing, a lot of contradictory things that he said. And he's like, the part was like, oh, I'm not anti-vax. Like he's not anti-vax, he's just anti-vax. Like if you're anti-vax, he's against you. Or no, if you're anti-vax, you get the point. But so it's confusing, it's silly. And I think he could sit every game of the season and still make 18 million. But I guess the other confusing part too is where he's like, there's a lot of work to be done. I'm not retiring, I'm gonna come back. But I mean, the other question, Eli, I'll just ask you quick thoughts on this before you transition to some Ben Simmons talk. What do you think, the Nets should do moving forward?
I think they're doing it right. I think they are absolutely like 100% doing it right. Like you can't have this distraction. He's basically not on the team. Like not basically, he isn't on the team. Like he is not a member of the Brooklyn Nets. I almost said New Jersey Nets. So like full but like he's not on the Nets, and there's nothing you can do about that. And does it stink for the Nets, title hopes or whatever? Yeah, I mean they're better with him, but they're good enough without him. More importantly, like they're standing up for what they all believe in. Like as far as I know, the entire rest of the Nets team is vaccinated. Nobody else has come out and said anything, whatever. That clearly they have to be, otherwise they can't play. They've got a good enough team still. They are not letting something that they clearly disagree with, spread in the locker room and have all these problems. And could you imagine the media circus if Kyrie's only on road games? Like every road close win or whatever, every home close loss or whatever, they're just going to be like, what if Kyrie was here? Or if Kyrie is there, they're going to ask him, are you going to get vaccinated soon? They're doing it right. Shout out to the Nets, for doing everything right. Like good for them. Move on and wait till either the vaccine mandate changes, which I don't see happening, or he gets vaccinated. If one of those happens, great, welcome him back. He's on the roster. He's a good player. He's a good leader. Like the players generally like him from everything that we've heard prior to this, at least. I hope there's not, anything going on behind the scenes otherwise, but welcome him back, and that's it. There's nothing else you can do. I think they're doing it right.
For sure. And I think I saw there was an interview with Steve Nash where they asked him a question about it, and he's like, he already said like, I'm not doing any more questions about Kyrie, which they have to do, and it is smart to just kind of put this to bed early on, before that, before it becomes a big thing. And kind of maybe a transition to the Simmons topic is like, who knows if the Nets want to possibly trade him, or even if that's a possibility. But with that being said, Ben Simmons, another player who has requested a trade, wants out to with the Philadelphia 76ers. There's been a lot of questions with him, especially after Game 7 in Philadelphia. He's at the rim with like 2 minutes left, and tie game, and he dishes it out, and then the rest is history. They lose Game 7 at home. Everyone's just trashing Ben Simmons. And it's been a tough situation for him there in Philly. Before I actually ask you just what you think about Simmons, I did want to show you some stats, or not really stats, but I was doing some research on like the future free agents in the NBA, Eli. And right now, if you look at it, the guys who can be a free agent in 2022, if you were to like rank the best 30 players, guys who have made all NBA teams, guys who have been all-stars, there's only 5 that could be a free agents this summer. And one of them, Russell Westbrook, who has a player option for $47 million. I doubt he's leaving the Lakers.
He's opting in.
He's going to opt in. You look at Kyrie Irving, he has a player option. That's the question.
That's the wild card.
You got James Harden, who did he sign an extension yet?
The deadline is tonight, and actually I just saw like it's all the deadlines to sign extensions are midnight tonight. Okay. So that's why we're starting to see a couple. Brogdon just got an extension like 20 minutes ago. I don't know if you saw that, but a couple people have. He's not going to do the extension because if he opts out next year, he can be the first player ever to get a deal that's worth $60 million a year because of like the years in service or whatever. So basically he's like, do I sign for 1 year, 47 or 5 years, like 270 or whatever the number is.
So he's going to opt out.
There's no reason for him to opt in. He's going to go. I think he resigns 110%, but he's not going to get an extension right now.
And then you got Brad Beal, who will probably opt out as well. And then Zach LaVine, who's just an unrestricted free agent. After that, 2023, LeBron, Jokic, those guys don't look like they're going anywhere. Zion and John Morant have team options with their teams. They'll probably get extensions.
Yeah, the rookie guys are not going anywhere.
Yeah, Chris Middleton and Vucevic. And then the rest of the guys are like 2024. Kawhi, Davis, Paul George, Devin Booker. That's 2024. 2025, Giannis, Damian Lillard, Jimmy Butler, Donovan Mitchell, Jason Tatum. So basically, the long answer to or just explanation for this is, it looks like we might be approaching a moment where there's going to be, after the last 10 years, there was tons of NBA player movement. In the next 2 to 3 to 4 years, I don't think we're going to be seeing a lot of these guys move unless there's something like the Ben Simmons situation, where in the middle of their really long, really large, really lucrative contracts, they're kind of like, I want out. Like, I want to jump ship. So the Sixers are.
That's what I think is happening. Yeah, that's what I think is happening.
Right in the middle of these contracts.
So I think we're shifting from, it started as player empowerment. I want to go where I want to go. And that happens a lot in free agency, right? Because like free agency became like a real tool where teams started planning on being buyers in free agency, right? I think what's happened recently is the players then started to realize, though, that if I do it that way, I lose out on a lot of money, because by re-signing with your same team, you can there's benefits, bird rights, all this kind of stuff. It's a longer conversation, but like you can re-sign for more money than you can sign in free agency. So what I think, and probably the bigger problem is if you just sign in free agency, you only have a few options. This summer, I think there were only 5 teams with like legitimate cap space. Mm-hmm. There were ways that you can create cap and you can go over the cap and bird rights and all this kind of stuff. Whatever.
It's a done.
Pat Riley is one of the best at it. Actually, Andy Ellsberg is the guy that does all that kind of stuff. So shout out Andy. Go Heat. But beyond that is there's a million different reasons why over the years we started to realize that free agency does make it a lot harder. What is still possible is making trades everywhere. And that's where I think the player empowerment is going. Is it makes much more sense for these guys to sign these massive deals and then ask for a trade, even if it's a year later. That's what I think is going to start happening. You mentioned a good example of what I think, if it goes anywhere, is Bradley Beal. You just said that he was going to opt out. I actually think it's the exact opposite. I think Bradley Beal is going to opt in and sign a massive extension. And then if it doesn't work in a year, then he gets traded. He asks to get traded. He's kind of been on the border. We've seen him get frustrated. He keeps talking about loyalty, and good for him. He's staying in Washington, and he's all intents and purposes, he's happy there. If that's what he wants to do, go for it. But if it ever doesn't get there, sign your extension and then ask for a trade. We started to get to the point where people don't care anymore. James Harden was an MVP candidate last year. After the first 2 weeks, everybody trashing him because he was like dogging it in Houston. Yeah. And then less than 5 months later, he's an MVP candidate, and everyone's like, "Oh, James Harden was so great."
Yeah. And I think the Brad Beal case, though, Eli, is really interesting because part of the reason I was like, I totally assumed, yeah, he's going to explore free agency is because he's a guy that has been with that same team his whole career. They haven't been competitive the past few seasons. And like there's been rumors about him possibly getting traded over the past couple of years. So like for him to be able to actually hit free agency and kind of weigh his options now, you would think he would do that. But as you're kind of saying,
he would lose so much money.
There's a new
Like at the end of the day, he would lose so much money. Why would you do that?
Wave in the NBA where it would make more sense for him to like opt in and then be like, yeah, let me just dip after that. Which to me, I still think like if I was him, I can't really. I guess the money. It's like at the end of the day, he can make so much more money. But I still don't know why you would want to re-sign with really a dumpster fire organization right now.
The other thing though is we said like he can't go to very many places. Because they can only go to, if he does that, he can only go to places with cap space.
Yeah.
And if you go look at the teams with cap space, typically the teams with cap space are either bad teams or like young, quote unquote, like up and coming teams. Like the Grizzlies will have cap space.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't even know if they will because they traded for whatever, the big trade they just made. Yeah. But like teams like that, the only way you're going to have cap space or if you have like a young superstar. Like the Mavericks this year, probably a better example. They obviously don't suck, whatever, but like they had a lot of cap space this year, didn't end up really using it because Kyle Lowry didn't go there and it wasn't a great free agent class. But you either have those kinds of teams or the really bad teams, and you're not going to want to go to any of those places, right? So your best bet, opt in, resign. But that doesn't happen very frequently, and that's maybe one team, right? They were the only team this year that would have fallen under that category. Who is it next year? Maybe if the Pelicans are good, which I'm not a buyer, sorry. Yeah. Like there's not a lot of places that you can go, right? Because you don't have cap space means you don't have good players typically, so it's just hard. So sign the deal and then get traded to a team later because when you trade a player, you can match contracts and that's how you sign players that's how you get players on your team if you have no cap space.
Yeah. Crazy. It's going to be, we're entering a different era. We're in the player empowerment era, and I don't know what this next era is. It's like even more player empowerment.
But, I think it's even more player empowerment.
Yeah, exactly.
Because now you get paid and go at least kind of where you want to go.
It's wild. It's really wild. Yeah. Let's transition though. Let's talk, I guess it's a little bit of a transition, kind of this past free agency, past off season, trades, signings. Who won the offseason, who lost the offseason, and then which team you think will improve the most because of the moves they made. Quick spoiler. I'm going to just lead us out here, Eli. I think the Heat won the offseason. We had a very disappointing playoff run. We got swept
to say the least.
To the Bucks, to say the least. And we go out. We re-signed Duncan Robinson, which was my highest priority as a Heat fan. We extended Jimmy, which kind of flew under the radar. Like I was shocked when that happened. And then we signed Kyle Lowry. So now we really are locked in with it. And of course, PJ Tucker, can't forget that move. Now we're kind of locked in.
And Morris and got Victor Oladipo on a mid-month, which I think is
I love that deal. I love that deal too. It's a low risk, high reward. But we're really locked into this, I guess, quad of like Lowry, Butler, Bam, and Duncan Robinson for the next 3 to 4 years, which is kind of exciting. Although also, my concerns with Lowry's, his age and Jimmy too. I'm interested to see how those 50 million, 40 million a year contracts might look when they're, over the hill. But I'm going to say, I think the Heat won the offseason. We're going to have a huge improvement this year. But who won the offseason for you and who lost it?
So I have 3 teams that I think won the offseason. I think the Heat were one of them. And you kind of mentioned that. I think everything that you said. I think the biggest thing with the Heat is they needed Kyle Lowry. Everything that Kyle Lowry does well is exactly what the Heat needed. So yes, he's a little bit older. Yeah, he got injured a little bit last year. I get it. Like there's a chance that I understand how the detractors might say this might blow up, but more than just the fact that they got a really good player in Lowry, they got exactly what the Heat needed. They needed a point of attack defender because think about who the guard defenders have been in the Heat the last couple of years. It's been Goran, it's been Tyler, it's been Kendrick Nunn. Like all of those guys are objectively bad defenders. Tyler's getting better though, but like they have the point of attack defender and they have a guy that can facilitate. I mean, the leaders and assists on the Heat the last 5 years have been Jimmy and Bam. The last 2 years, since they've been there, and it feels like so much longer. Like, when was the last time the Heat had like a real point guard? It was probably Jason Williams, even. Like, Mario
Yeah.
Chalmers isn't like a legitimate point, like not a he doesn't play like point guard like that. Goran's a scoring guard. Like, they needed a guy that can distribute on offense and take the load off of Jimmy, Bam, Tyler, even, and give Duncan in a spot where he can shoot the ball. So the Heat, I think everything you said spot on. The two other teams that kind of stick out to me are the Nets, with this whole Kyrie thing looming, I guess. But like, generally speaking, just for what they could control, all the depth pieces that they signed, I think were awesome.
Yeah.
I think they got cheap rookies. They got two cheap rookies. They traded Landry Shamet for an extra first round pick, and Shamet's about to get paid. So they got cheaper so they can build around the core. I like Day'Ron Sharp, and I think Cam Thomas has looked like an absolute steal right now.
Unreal.
I'll tell you right now, probably my favorite move in free agency. I'll mention a couple, but Patty Mills to the Nets is probably the number one.
Yeah.
If you're not talking Lowry as like the big name guy, like under the radar ones, I guess Patty Mills to the Nets, I think, is the perfect fit. And especially now without Kyrie, I think he fits perfectly right there too. So I think the Nets building their depth. They got James Johnson as a defensive guy. They re-signed Bruce Brown to a 1-year deal, like a pretty cheap deal. They got Millsap and LaMarcus Aldridge to come back. Like, I think the Nets just did an unbelievable job somehow continuing to get players under this roster. And then the other team that I think is going on a little bit under the radar, I think the Jazz did an unbelievable job this offseason, because I think the one thing that they're still missing one thing. They don't really have a great point of attack defense. So without going on a soapbox of what I think went wrong last year, like the two things that I think they couldn't do last year is they couldn't stop anybody from getting to the paint, which was masked by Rudy being awesome. But once they were able to be spaced out, Rudy could no longer do what he could do because he was standing at the 3-point line, and they never had a counter to go small. Those are the two things. One of them they didn't really fix, honestly. They still don't have a great point of attack defender. Conley, Mitchell, Bogdan, Ingles, those guys aren't really great point of attack defenders. So they could have done a little bit better, sure. But the biggest thing that I think they did is they gave themselves a chance to go small ball. And they got Rudy Gay and Eric Paschall, who can play small ball 4 or 5, like in a pinch, whenever Rudy does need to rest. And I think that those two moves were massive for them. One of the other moves that I said I really liked is Rudy Gay. Yeah, they got Paschall for nothing.
Yeah, that was shocking, especially because of how young he is, Yeah.
And I do think like Paschall is a little overrated just in general, because he put up big numbers when he was like the older rookie on a really, really bad team. And then last year you saw he didn't take an extra step. I think he's just a good, solid, like 15-minute a game guy, but that's all you need when you've got like the Jazz were the best team record-wise in the NBA last year, right up there. I forget if it was them or the Sixers. I know they were like right there or whatever, but like they were right there, like regular season-wise, they're going to be awesome. And then now if they ever have to go small, you can put a guy like Paschall in for 12, 15 minutes or Gay for 12, 15 minutes and be fine there. So I really like what those guys did. Those are kind of the three teams that I think won the offseason for longer term too. So just some moves that I kind of liked, tiny ones. I loved Reggie Bullock and Sterling Brown to the Mavs, Lonzo to the Bulls, Kemba to the Knicks, and JaVale to the Suns. Those were kind of the other ones.
The Knicks, really? Every point guard the Knicks get is over the hill. It's like they got D Rose. Then they have Stephon Marbury. They got Kemba. Like they never get a guy when he's like in his prime. It's always a big name guy, and it's like Kemba, Madison Square Garden. That's gonna be like fun. That's a great like talking point, of course. But
I just think
he was so bad.
He wasn't that bad. He was worse than. It's all about expectations. Kemba, again, he went from overrated to underrated really fast. Like if you expect him to be like an all-star player like he has been in his prime, he's not that anymore. And when you looked at the Celtics last year, they disappointed in so many ways, whatever. Like, yes, Kemba was a disappointment relative to his expectations, but Kemba still had a bunch of good games. Kemba can still score. Kemba can still facilitate a little bit. The Knicks pride themselves on defense, and if Kemba's your worst he's not a good defender at all. That's for sure. But they have They have good enough defenders around him, plus Tibbs. That I just think it's a good fit. And they didn't get him for a lot. They got him for $8 million. Like that's nothing, relatively speaking. Right.
Yeah. And I guess the hope would be that he doesn't hinder the development of some of the younger guys and how they can balance everything out,
I mean, Quickly's good. Quickly's a solid player, but he's not somebody. If you're banking your entire future on developing Emmanuel,
it's more like their wings and their big men. They have a lot of front court depth, obviously. So
no, and I agree. But now they just got another scorer, another facilitator. And that's the thing that they needed. Who on the Knicks could create last year? Alec Burks was getting massive minutes.
That's true.
Yeah,
But Burks
they
is
had
more
nobody that
off-ball.
could create.
Yeah.
The Knicks had nobody that could create. It was Randall doing everything by himself, which we'll get to when we talk Knicks stuff later, I'm sure. But like Randall could do a bunch of stuff, and he was awesome last year. There's no doubt about it. Other than that, if anybody else had the ball, who were you scared of?
Yeah. And
Like,
this actually is a good transition, Eli, to we're gonna now just talk about, the East playoff teams and the playoff race, because I think I'll just give you my top six, because I kind of see them in different tiers. I got the Nets and the Bucks, I think, are tier one. Then the next tier, I wouldn't be surprised if these next, I guess, seeds 3 to 6 ended up in any way, shape, or form, would be Miami Heat, Atlanta Hawks, Boston Celtics, and I will give the Sixers an edge over the teams that are in the kind of the play-in race.
I think you have to still.
Yeah.
They still have Embiid. As of right now, they have Simmons. If they trade him, they'll get something for him. So I agree with you.
Yeah, they were last year's number 1 seed. So I think whether they have Simmons or not, I'll say top 6. They can avoid the play-in. But those are my top 6. Can we agree on that off the bat at least?
Yes, we can. In some order, I think those are the top 6. And like you said, the top 1 and 2, if you want to split them into tiers, I think it's Bucks, Nets for sure in whatever order, and then Hawks, Heat, Sixers, Celtics in whatever order. So I agree with that.
All right. So next up, who do you think then, Eli, is going to be that 7th team that will be? I guess they'll be in the play-in race, and then if they win, they get that first round opponent of the number 2 seed.
So for me, I think the 7 seed. I think it's the Chicago Bulls. I think there's some flaws for sure. There's no doubt about it. I think their defense is not going to be good at all. I think their depth scares me a little bit. I think you've got a pretty good starting 5, although Patrick Williams is out right now for a couple more weeks at least, so they might start a little slow. And I think you got Caruso off the bench. Kobe White off the bench, at least as a scorer, is fine.
I forgot about him. That's so funny.
Yeah, no, honestly. And then honestly, who else after that? I don't really, it's hard beyond that, right? So I think the depth isn't great. But I think at the end of the day, especially in a league where depth matters, like long term, which is why I think I have them a little bit lower, but like they have star power. There's no doubt about it. Right. And on any given night, like you can afford the depth that they have is important in the sense of like a lot of the guys kind of do similar things. And that's why I think their ceiling isn't so high, because they don't have a lot of diversity and they don't have a lot of guys that can like match things up a little bit. But they've got enough star power that like if DeRozan has to miss a couple games, like Levine could just pick it up a little bit. If Vucevic has to miss a couple games, Vucevic might be the only one because he's a big man, but at least they'll be able to score. Like this team is going to have a lot of star power. They're going to score a lot. And I just think the Bulls, they have enough star power that I think and I think they're desperate enough. Like, they know that they need to win. So I think they're going to give it their all. And I think that they're my 7th seed.
That's fair. I don't strongly disagree. I disagree a little bit. I think that
Lonzo's huge. I didn't even mention Lonzo's name just to throw it out.
We did. Lonzo always gets forgotten. And he very much, I think, is an X factor with them. But I actually have Chicago at 8. I'm giving the Knicks an edge over them just because the Knicks.
They're my 8. They're my 8.
So we'll talk about the Knicks.
And it's fine.
We'll come right back to the Knicks. But on Chicago, I think that my biggest concern with them is the front court depth. Specifically with like they don't really have any good centers after Vucevic, and they also just really don't have any defensive bigs.
Tony Bradley is like he's not great, but he's a 10-minute a game, 15-minute a game solid defensive big. So
someone you forgot to mention though actually is our guy Derek Jones Jr., which that was a signing I think flew under the radar. And he's a guy who I'd say he's hot and cold, he's inconsistent. But I think something that you can depend on him usually is he's a very solid wing defender. So if you look at their lineup, like, they need to stop, you can put out a lineup with Lonzo, Caruso, Pat Williams, and Jones. And then I guess the big guy in the middle, who knows, maybe it's
Vooch. I mean,
Vooch, but Vooch,
it would just have to be Vooch. At least Vooch is a good rebounder. Like you're right. They don't have big man depth. That's for sure.
And getting a guy like, JaVale McGee would have been awesome, which, I know you mentioned him earlier, but I think my other concern with them too was their 5 best players, in my opinion, cannot share the court. Like, I think Caruso being off the bench, I think Caruso's a starter in the NBA. And I was shocked that the team that was going to throw this much money at him was a team that isn't even going to start him, because obviously you're starting Lonzo and Levine. That's a very exciting backcourt, in my opinion. DeMar DeRozan, he's, I guess, at the 3, even though he's more of a 2 guard, but that really
He played a lot of 4 for the Spurs last year.
Yeah, which is shocking. And last year he had a very sneaky good season with the Spurs. People kind of
I had him as an all-star. Remember we talked about it.
Yeah,
I had him as an
all-star. I think exactly. And
was it?
Forgot.
And
then Pat Williams, expecting him to improve this season. He's a guy who some people
wanted to
do the Kawhi Leonard comparison. I don't think
I love him, and I still think he's going to be a star.
Okay,
so
he's
still
we'll
young,
see about
so
that.
there yet,
but maybe it's like an early Jimmy Butler season type of vibe from him. So I actually think they are like a high upside team, but I kind of think the floor is like, I wouldn't be totally shocked if like Vooch misses some time, DeMar misses some time. Maybe Alonzo's not as consistent as he's looked maybe in preseason, although he's looked great. And then they're like a 10 seed before you know it. But I do like their, the prospect of
I just think they have so much talent.
They're extremely talented, and it'll be fun.
Lonzo, Levine, DeRozan, Vooch, like how is that team going to be a 10 seed?
A lot of it is on, well, I think it's more like injuries, like because they're not deep. They don't have depth. But a lot of it, I think, is going to come down to also just Billy Donovan and figuring out the right rotations and the X's and O's. And if he doesn't,
that's why I don't have
coach of the year candidate guy.
That's why I don't have them higher, because I don't believe in Billy Donovan that much. Yeah. So that was like kind of one of the things I wrote as like my case against them is defense, depth, and coaching.
Yeah. So then why don't I just give you kind of my explanation for New York? I think last year, I think they're ahead of schedule. Last year, they were a team that a lot of us didn't think was even sniffing close to the playoffs. They, of course, make the 4 seed. I think they were the 4 seed or 5 seed. No, they were the 4 seed. They had home court advantage against the Hawks. Really disappointed. Came up short on Randall's, back, because Randall was really taking them the whole way. And after that first game, I remember all the Knicks fans were like, well, do we really think Randall's going to play that poorly again? And I was like, Randall's not really a guy that you can like say that about just yet. But with that being said, I think that was his first season being the number 1 guy on a team. I think they're all going to come back. They're going to be hungrier. And they're also a team, like, I wouldn't be shocked if they were like a 5 seed or 4 seed again. But because of all the other teams that I'm just giving them the edge, I'm going to say they're going to be my next team in, number 7, giving them the edge over a very talented Chicago team. But I'm going to stick with them. And I think those top 7 teams, for me at least, were the same. There was 7 of the same teams that were in the playoffs last year. And the Wizards were the 8 seed. So subbing them in for Chicago at number 8. But any thoughts on New York? Yeah. So for me, New York is just like, I think that they're good. They're solid, clearly, right? But they're really good on defense. There's no doubt about that, right? I think they might take a half step back because now they have Kemba and Evan Fournier, who's also not a good defender, taking some minutes. Not that the guys in front of them were that much better. Like, they did it despite, great guard defense, other than Elfrid Payton, who is just not a good basketball player, just a good defender. But Tibbs is really good in the regular season all the time. So I get that. He plays his guys big minutes, which is why they generally overperform expectations in the regular season, because they play their guys more than most guys do. They have some depth this year for sure. They definitely, that's the one thing that they definitely have. They have a lot of depth. There's no doubt about it. Right. But the case against them is they had amazing luck last year. I hate using that word because it's sometimes it's more than just luck, but they were one of the top 3 or 4 healthiest teams last year. They had an absolute outlier 3-point defense season, which is the thing that people have been talking about. Like, people talked about all of last year is like they had the lowest, I think it was either lowest or second lowest, and it was by a pretty far margin, 3-pointers made against them, which is an outlier thing that switches every single year. That's not something that translates. Like, sometimes people just miss shots against you, right? And if those 2 things kind of regress to the mean a little bit, then, that makes it hard for them. They have a lack of star power, I think. Randall is obviously really good. He got a lot better, but I got to see it again. He went from I remember the stat. He went from 18% on pull-up jumpers to I think somewhere in the 41, 42, right? It was 41 something on pull-up jumpers. Can he get better at that? Absolutely. Improvements happen, but go from 18 to 41%. I got to see that again, right? He just hit that game winner. He just hit that game winner in the preseason. I know. And I mean, good for him. Sure. But I got to see it again before I say that he's a legitimate, no-brainer all-star and all NBA-ish guy last year. I got to see that again. And beyond him, who's the next star? Kemba, RJ Barrett. I like RJ Barrett. We'll talk about him later, but I like RJ Barrett. But I
I got to see it again, right? Like and the biggest thing I think is like, I think they could be a better team, but have a worse record because of health, because of 3-point defense, and the East is just better. I mean, they were in front of the Hawks. They were in front of the Hawks, Heat, and Celtics last year. 3 teams that we just said we all believe in because they all had either good off seasons in the case of the Heat and the Celtics, I think, or the Hawks, who just clearly outperformed expectations and are a young up and coming team. So I think they can be a little bit better, but like better as a team, but I think they're just going to fall a little bit in the standings, and that's okay.
Agreed. And that's a good point, honestly. And I think that makes me maybe inch closer to thinking that they're kind of in the same tier with Chicago, which they probably are. I want to see it from Chicago before I give them the edge.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
So then, but if you asked me a week ago, I've given it more thought, like those 8 teams. If you asked me a week ago, I would be like, honestly, I have no clue who's making those last 2 spots because we just said, we both picked New York and Chicago for 7 and 8. I think Charlotte's going to get better, and they weren't healthy last season. I think Indiana was like a team that got destroyed by injuries, and Sabonis was amazing. So, like, if they can come back strong, Malcolm Brogdon just got paid. Who knows what that's going to mean? Washington's a team that did make it. They lost Westbrook, but they added more depth. I think they have Montrezl Harrell. They have Kyle Kuzma. They have KCP, and Spencer Dinwiddie, which is another move that I feel like I really was sleeping on. But if you just look at kind of those other teams and Toronto, who I always forget to mention because I really don't care about them. But now they have Goran, so I kind of do. Those
are up. They're my 9 seed.
Really?
And honestly, I thought about it at 8. I thought about it. I couldn't do it for the Knicks.
Toronto, yeah. So Toronto, I think they're one of the teams that I'll probably put like I think I wouldn't put them in the play in 9 and 10, but like just those 4 teams, like. To be honest, I wouldn't be shocked if Washington was the 7 seed. Like if you told me that right now they're going to be the 7 seed, or if you told me that Charlotte would be, because those are teams that have talent. And I guess maybe this is just another case where like the NBA is very good right now, and like even like a few years ago, I remember people were saying like, oh, there's 4 teams in the East, or there's 2 teams in the East, or really there was 1 team in the East, which was the Cavs. And now it seems like it's really open, or not super open because we obviously think the Bucks and the Nets are
there's depth. There's more depth.
Yeah, there's a lot more depth. Because then even Cleveland, who's a team that we're not going to talk about, I think they're a fun team. I think they're you don't think so? I think they have some good.
Their roster just makes no sense. They have a lot of good young players, but their roster makes no sense.
That's fair, and
I think they're building something, but they're nowhere close.
They have to figure out the Sexton situation too. But I'm really excited for the play-in race, and the play-in's gonna be a blast for sure. But I don't know, are there any of those teams you wanna give a case for why? Which of those teams that I kind of just mentioned, who should we look out the most if our 8 playoff teams that we just picked don't make it? Which one's going to steal their spot?
Yeah, so I think if you're looking at the East, the bottom 3 teams that just don't really have a chance that everybody knows, the Magic, the Cavs, and the Pistons, we'll forget about them for now. They're young, fun teams. I think all of them have something good going for them, but they're just not there yet. So now you're looking at the last 2 spots down to 4 teams: Raptors, Pacers, Hornets, Wizards. I have the Raptors at 9 and the Pacers at 10. Then I have the Hornets at 11 and then the Wizards at 12. So my case for the Raptors is they're my team like every year. I feel like every year I just end up defending them. And I've been
right. Were you right about them last year?
Okay, but that's the problem. That's what I think people are looking way too much at last year and then not focusing on everything else that is there. That everything that could go wrong last year did. They were so beat up. They were so injured. And I don't think we're talking about nearly enough the fact that this team, less than a month before the season, was asked to pick up and move everything, play an entire season during a COVID season on the road. You think anybody in Tampa was watching the Raptors? Because
that was my argument for why they weren't going to be good a year ago.
And in that case, I will give you is like, okay, fine. I probably underestimated that part. So I'll give you that for last year. But now I think we're underestimating the importance of that this year. And like, why can't this team be so much better than they were last year? They tanked last year at the end of the year after they were like 18 and 17 or something at one point. Like they were right there, and in a shortened season, remember, so 18 and 17, small sample size, but that's half the season, right? When you only play 72 games. They tanked at the end of last year. They dealt with the whole Lowry thing, which everybody knew that he was about to leave. He had that weird press conference where he basically said goodbye before the deadline, and they didn't end up trading him. And then they tanked him the rest of the year. Like he did barely play the rest of the season. Their roster is not bad at all. They have unbelievable coaching. They're going to defend like crazy. They can put out lineups of like Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam, Scotty Barnes.
Harry Trent Jr. too.
Gary Trent Jr. Like they have good players. This is a good basketball team with great coaching, with a great home court advantage that they didn't have last year. The only reason I don't have them even higher is Siakam's health. Siakam is going to miss a little bit of time because he just had the shoulder surgery. I think Siakam is like, if he was healthy, I would pick him as like a big, like, I don't think there's a comeback player of the year actual award or whatever in the NBA, but like a guy like that, he talked a lot about like his anxiety and like his weird, like didn't handle the COVID situation properly and like, or positively. Like, I think Siakam's in for a breakout, quote unquote, like season compared to last year. Once he gets healthy. The only thing is that sucks, which is why I have them as a 9 seed. With a healthy Siakam, I think they're right there with 7-8 Bulls.
And
Knicks.
even OG Anunoby, he's a guy.
Even Richard Goro. Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
He's there too. He's awesome.
Yeah, and I think OG's a guy who's going to be on most improved player watch as well. He's actually someone I think you said, like, oh, OG's going to be really good this year. And he's right on a line where it's like, we can keep saying next year. I'm saying he's on one where you can keep saying next year, or you might
this is the year.
We might actually have to give up on him. Like if it's not this year, I'm gonna.
Well, first of all, you don't have to give up on him. He's still a really, really good basketball player. Is he an all-star? No.
Yeah,
but
that's what I'm saying. He'll never be like what we kind of keep expecting him to be. But
I'm not sleeping on that. And then the last thing, real quick, just about the Pacers, my 10th team. I think that they've got all the power. Like the roster is there. And they had probably the biggest coaching improvement, honestly, maybe ever, to go from a guy that was hated after 20 games to what is Rick Carlisle, top 5, 6, 7 coach in the NBA right now. Yeah. Maybe ever from year to year. But their health is the thing. Is like you could tell me they're a 3 seed if everything goes right, or you could tell me that they're out of the playoffs, and I would believe you either way. I think they have the talent in the roster. You're
talking me into them. I can't believe I stepped.
They're just not healthy. You said healthy last year, but no player on this team has ever been healthy. Sabonis is the only one that's ever like had like a relatively clean bill of health.
Health is one of those things. You're not healthy until you're healthy, and you're healthy until you're not healthy. Like who knows?
Yeah,
like, my point is this season.
At some point, it becomes real, and every single player on that team, other than Sabonis, has been hurt multiple times in their career.
If it's April and we're looking back and we're like, why didn't we look at this team that has Brogdon, Karis LeVert, Sabonis, TJ Warren, Miles Turner, and an amazing coach? Like, why didn't we think they were going to be a top 5 seed, let alone we didn't even think they're going to make it? But who knows? We'll see. We'll come back. And
health is the problem. And I think the Hornets are just too young. I think they're just getting there, but they have the worst center room in the NBA, and they're just so young, and Hayward is never healthy. And then the Wizards, I don't know. Beal is really good. They've got a lot more solid players, like you said, but I don't know. They have a new coach we've never seen before, Wes Unseld Jr. Hopefully he's got something
that's
in
definitely
him.
A factor.
But I think they're still figuring it out. And in a deep East, I would think they're 12th. But
cool.
Yeah.